What is going on? We are back at it again with another episode of True Capacity Talks. And today we have someone that most of you probably don't know that I'm friends with because we don't post Instagram stories of ourselves all the time. He actually lives halfway across the United States over in the great state of Arizona. And we are here to talk about a handful of things. Very much looking forward to it. Ted, today, how are you doing? How are the muscles? How is your bald head? What is happening?
I'm doing fantastic, James. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I shined up nice and good today. Got my turtle wax on. Yeah, I'm doing great. I can't wait to jump in.
Yeah, I love that, man. I'd kind of like to dive deep to start off. I think that there's a phrase that you know very well, and I really want to understand what it means to you. Okay, you'll never get hired being that fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that a teacher, a masterclass person told me. I suppose I should go back a step or two before we jump right into that piece. So my first career, my original training was as an opera singer. So I was, college, I did grad school, all of the fancy degrees that I have say opera singer on it in some way, shape, or form. And growing up, I was also super overweight. I was morbidly obese the whole time. I got that glucose intolerance test for the listeners who might not know what that is. That's where you go and you drink this super sugary liquid, and then you sit in a waiting room for 3 hours, and you get a blood draw every 30 minutes to see if you're diabetic. I got that at 13 years old. So not a healthy upbringing to oversimplify. But when I turned 19, I was in my second year of school, a place called Ithaca College, lovely part of the world if you ever get a chance to go. But I was singing in a masterclass where it's public. Everybody can come and see. And the masterclasses there were usually pretty well attended. This was no exception. I was singing. I felt like I did pretty well. And then the teacher, the master clinician, looked me in the face and threw that line at me. You sing just fine, but you'll never get hired being that fat. And that was the only piece of feedback that he gave me. And it shattered me in every possible way, physically, obviously, because when I won't speak for everybody, but in my case, I knew I was fat, right? Like, you don't have to tell a fat person that they're fat. They know. At least I did. But no one had ever hit me in the face with that in the way that he had. And I'm thick-skulled enough that that's kind of what, in retrospect, I needed. Now, it sucked in the short term, in the days and weeks, maybe months after that. It took me a long time to get over that with the help of really good friends, the help of some professional mental health counseling. So I'm a huge proponent of therapy. If you're not in therapy, go do BetterHelp or something like that. I've never done one of those sessions, not a paid sponsorship, but I'm a big fan of getting professional help that way. Nobody needs coaches like coaches need coaches. And through dealing with that first bit of real adversity, I was able to reform my identity and create a whole new version of myself. I've lost more than 130 pounds since then. And now this is what I do all day, is I work with singers who want to maybe get a little more fit, really become an athlete, because singers like to talk about themselves being athletes, but they don't quite know what that means. I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit here. But it all started because someone hit me in the face with a really uncomfortable truth that took me days, weeks, maybe months. I genuinely don't remember how long it took me to get through it and start acting in accordance with the person I wanted to be. But it often starts from a place of pain. And I hate using pain as a motivator, but damn, is it effective.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to understand. I guess I'm curious if you knew at that point, right? Hell of a performance. You go out there and you just knock the socks off of everybody. If you knew at that point that you were not in a position where your health was optimal for you to be here long term and have a higher quality of life, I mean, why did it take that master clinician telling you that for you to actually change?
Because I didn't think it was that big a deal. You know, especially in the opera world, like, what's the stereotype you think of when you think of an opera singer, right? Like, the stereotype is opera singers don't have a sideways. They're round 100%. So I thought, all the biggest opera singers in the world are super fat. I can be super fat, and that's fine. And honestly, in the 80s, the early 90s, you can get away with that. But as there have been more and more people, the competition gets higher and higher and higher. Now, singers can't afford to give casting directors an easy way to write them off.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you got to be movie star pretty to be on stage these days.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You say that about opera singers. I would say the same stereotype maybe exists for everyone that sings. When I was in chorus, I never had a single instructor that wasn't overweight, borderline obese. And when I was singing at the church, again, same director, borderline obese, definitely overweight, right? Body fat percentage outside of normal ranges, and definitely took a damper on their ability to have endurance, even singing. Like, forget the rest of life, but just singing in general, we have to take many breaks.
For sure.
So you have that said to you, you'll never get hired being that fat. You take some time, right? A month, 2 months, 6 months. You said you're not really sure how long it took to work through that. But from that point, right, what was the first thing that you did? Maybe not knowing that you needed to lose 130, but knowing that you needed to do something. What did you do first on the physical side to attack this?
I got super lucky. And I acknowledge that every time I think about this, because there were a couple of other guys in my program at the time. One was the same year as me, one was a year older, who were not in great shape, but they were working on it. You know, they were in way better shape than I was. And we were friends, right? We were friends before I was in this masterclass. We were friends after that. I was at one of their weddings the other, a year or two ago. So we're still good friends for sure. But I'm just so grateful to them that they literally dragged me to the gym on campus. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. You know, you'd seen dumbbells and barbells and treadmills and like machines and stuff like that. But as a 19-year-old fat kid who had never been to the gym a day in his life, I was scared. I was intimidated. I mean, all of the things that you might hear a new gym goer say. But these guys, they were my first coaches unofficially. They took me under their wing and they were like, hey, this is how you get it set up. Let's get this done. I also started reading everything I could at a certain point. I, had a subscription to Muscle and Fitness, which, now we joke and say it's Muscle and Fiction magazine. And I was at GNC all the time. I spent way too much money on supplements that didn't work. Do you remember, I don't know if you were in this game or maybe your listeners were, but the original Jack 3D compound, that formula that was on the market for like 6 to 8 months. And then the FDA was like, there's almost cocaine in this. You need to take this off. Yeah, I got the original formula. I was right in that time. So I just got immersed in that world as best as I could because I had welcoming friends who knew that it scared me, knew that I was intimidated. They could see it, but they still took me under their wing, got me through, one step at a time. And now we still have a great, like, semi-competitive relationship. They both went on to become really, really great singers in their own right and have great careers. So now I'm the strength guy and now I'm coaching them a little bit. And it's great to kind of have that role reversal. But it was just through friends and through people who turned out to be coaches. I just got super lucky.
Yeah, I think that luck is something that we often overlook, right? Because we want to claim that we had it all figured out, or we had the exact right people, or we manufactured because we reverse engineered. how we got to where we got to. Over that journey, right? Kind of sounds like diving head first, right? Getting into muscle and fitness, living in GNC, learning to speak, watching YouTube videos. Did you start with any fitness blender? Was that around at that time?
Fitness Blender was not around at that time. No, this was back in 2009. Yeah,
Okay.
middle of 2009 into 2010. So YouTube was barely a thing.
Ooh, brand new.
Even then too. Yeah. So I really didn't, I don't remember using YouTube. I was probably on that as a resource a little bit. And to your previous point, you can call me many, many things, but self-made is not one of them.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And I think that when people are in a position where they can look back and they can see that there were mentors, there were programs, there was consultancy, there was friends, there was family, there was love, there was a partner that was instrumental in getting there. I really appreciate your willingness to not say, ding, 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 here's my ticket, I did it on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. No way.
Yeah. So when you're diving into this world, did you start with workouts out of muscle and fitness, out of what they were saying, like 6-pack shredded abs? Did you jump into that kind of stuff, or did you forge a different path?
Oh, I definitely just pulled right from the magazines because I didn't know anything better.
Yeah.
I was like, the guy on the cover looks great. I want to look like the guy on the cover. Why not? I'm going to do it. And honestly, like looking back, no, those workouts were not great. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have to be great because I was starting from such a low level that, like, if you add the best workout in the world might be a 50 times multiplier on your fitness. But when your fitness is 0, you still end up with 0. So if you're doing a crappy workout and it's a level 1 workout and you get to add 1, like the difference between 0 and 1 is infinite. So start with a crappy workout. That's fine. As you grow, as you mature, you can start getting more specific and start talking about total weekly tonnage on certain muscle parts and certain joints, and I'll nerd out about that all day now. And that's the way that I program for myself these days. But 10 years ago, when I'm more than 350 pounds and I'd never, done a bicep curl at all, it doesn't matter if I'm going supinated or neutral or who cares? Like, just move, just do something. Because if you're doing nothing, something's always better.
Yeah, no, I think that's the overcomplication, right? Almost as an excuse for like it's perfection or it's nothing, right? Yeah. I'm going to do it exactly the way that Chris Hemsworth said that I should do it, or I'm going to do it not at all. And that's an interesting place to be in that really doesn't get you anywhere. When you went on this journey, though, right? 130 pounds. So you said 350 at the time?
So my scale went up to 350 and I broke it.
Okay. Talk to me about that. What do you mean you broke it? Like it actually just stopped working?
It wouldn't weigh me. Like I stepped on it and said error.
Wow. So it went up to the 350 and then after that, you just no idea where you were.
Yep. So I was somewhere north of 350. So that's kind of my baseline. I went from 350, somewhere above that, down to 130. I never found out what my actual top weight was, but I've lost somewhere north of 130 pounds, but I can't quantify that. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So I just say 130, 350 to 220.
Yeah. And that 130, did that take a year, 2 years, 5 years? How long are we talking from the time that you broke the scale to the time that you claimed the 130?
Yeah. So that took roughly 4 years and it was not continuous all at once. So I was up at 350. I remember I dropped from, north of 350. I'll just simplify and say 350. I was at 350 and I dropped to 320 in like a month. Right? Because you can. When you go from nothing to something and you have, a piece of lettuce, I'm oversimplifying, of course, but it makes a big difference. So I dropped those first 30 pounds like nothing. Then I remember going from 320 to roughly 280, and I hung out at 280 for 6-8 months because I remember thinking like, damn, I've lost a lot of weight. And I did. 70 pounds is a lot of weight to take off of a body for sure. Then I kind of got the itch again. I was like, man, like I'm 280, lost a ton of weight, but I still don't feel like I look that great. And so I got back into it with a little bit more education, and I was tracking things like calories and macros. And so I lost a little bit more weight, and I got down to like 240 and then 220. So everything all said and done with the pauses and with the breaks took about 4 years.
Okay. And across that 4 years, I mean, what would you say the biggest obstacle or the biggest hurdle, biggest struggle was along that journey?
So the thing that everyone will always say is it was myself, right? It was my own mindset. And that's true, but is this a PG-13 language?
You can say whatever word that you want to say.
Okay, great. I always want to double check.
Yeah.
It's true, you are your own worst enemy, but that's also total bullshit because you're also your own biggest ally, and you have to be. So the biggest obstacle, I could just say it was my mindset, but that's kind of a cop-out. So really the biggest obstacle was keeping fire in it and staying hungry. Because I got to that 280 and I was complacent there for a while. I was like, this is fine. I can stay here. 70 pounds is more weight than most people will ever lose, and all that's true. But you have to raise your standard. You always have to raise your standard and move the goalpost and say, this is where I am. I'm content with that, but you got to stay ambitious. Something that I still struggle with every single day is balancing that ambition and contentment. If you're too content, you'll never improve. If you're too ambitious, you'll drive yourself crazy and burn out in no time. So it's a balancing act for sure. It's never perfect.
That scale for you, right? Tipping that scale and trying to balance that. Was that something that you had struggled with prior to the weight loss, or was that you always had that dog in you? You always had that I'm going to push further, I'm going to do more. Like, was that something that you learned about yourself then, or that you already had?
That was absolutely something that I learned about myself over that journey. Because I was content, at 350, and I was content. Like, I was pretty good at school growing up. Like, I never really had to try to get decent grades. I was not like valedictorian or anything like that. But, I was good enough. I was passing my classes and, I wasn't getting punished at home. So I never really tried. And up until then, thinking back, I was never really challenged that much. On the scale of things that can be challenging, I had never really done a hard thing. And now it's one of my mantras that I tell everybody is like, you can do hard things and then also seek out hard things to do. Because you don't get to choose your values, you only get to demonstrate them. And you only get the opportunity to demonstrate your values when they're challenged.
That's a very good point. What values do you think that you hold today?
It's a great question. Check out my Instagram to find out what values I'm demonstrating. I don't know. I would love to. The values that I want to demonstrate are honesty when it hurts and when it's easy. Balance of ambition and contentment, which is something I'm striving for every single day, or I'm doing my best to strive for every single day. And challenge, right? Challenging yourself and challenging the people around you in helpful, productive ways, but never letting yourself fall into that like too much contentment. Because I think that's where I would be, all things being equal, is I would fall into like, I'm fine. I've got enough this, I've got enough that. I don't need to do anything. But that's not true, because I have a population of people who are really not okay, right? A population of people who I do work with and who I want to work with who are not okay. And I'm not reaching enough of them. They're not hearing the message. They're not changing their lives. So clearly it's not okay with me that group of people exists. And I'm talking about singers, of course. It's not okay with me that singers exist who are being put through the hell, the shit that I had to go through over those 4 years. And then after that too, behind getting in shape and losing the weight and fighting those mental battles, and then getting put into this meat grinder of a music industry where everyone sucks. Not talent-wise, everyone's very talented, but lots of people are not great human beings in the music industry. And so people get churned out of the meat grinder. I didn't come up with that idea, by the way. People have been calling the music industry a meat grinder for as long as I've been associated with the music industry. And there's no reason for it. The only reason people are stuck in that cycle is because they don't know better. They don't know that there's a better way. And I didn't know there was a better way, but it's something I discovered for myself along this journey that I've been on for, gosh, what year is it? 2023? How many years would that be? Many, 15 years, give or take.
Yeah, and you're talking about these individuals that don't know better, right? That are trying to get it figured out, that are being put through emotional and psychological turmoil in a job that they're trying to do because they love it, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe they're trying to chase fame, whatever. It's not for me to judge, but whatever their impetus there is to be on this path. You say that this type of people, this group of people are suffering. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel that you have a deficit in your character that needs to be corrected for you to actually have the impact that you're looking to have in this industry?
Patience. Definitely patience. Because I see the problem and I'm doing my best to attack the problem and get the information out there and contact the people, at both the people who are in the trenches, but also the people who are teaching the people in the trenches, and the directors of these programs, and working with them to try and work with their singers and all of that great stuff. And I want it, and I want to do it now because I see the problem and I know I can solve it. And it's true, I can. I've solved it many times with many people, but I'm really working on staying patient, because there's thousands of singers and there's one of me. And you know, my wife, Miriam, of course, works with me. So there's two of us who are trying to impact thousands of singers and programs and really change the whole pedagogical system. Is that going to happen overnight? No, of course not. Do I know that logically? Yes, of course I do. Do I want it to happen overnight? Of course I do. Right? Like, and is that a little selfish? Maybe. Yes. Do I want to be, the number one teacher that comes to everyone's mind right away? The number one coach who's like, oh, I want to get better at this. Let me call. Of course I do. And that's a little selfish. That's conceited. I know. But I also know I'm really good at this. And the people who I work with get really good results. And I want to deliver that to everyone so that no one has to go through what I went through for as long as I went through it.
You say conceited.
Yeah.
I want to unpack that for a second, because, and I think that this can be summed up in one question, and we can absolutely rip this apart. But if you were at the helm, if you were the go-to guy, if High Note Performance was the organization that impacted all of these people's lives in the way that you're looking for it to, mm-hmm. would the industry that you're trying to be in and serve, would it be better off with you at the helm or somebody else?
A really good question. And my knee-jerk answer is yes, of course, it would be better with me at the helm. But who hasn't thought that, right? So I believe that if and when High Note gets to that place, then I will be able to produce better results. And I'm not trying to lead the whole industry. What I am trying to do is educate people and give them the skills and the habits and the traits to just become rock stars in the industry that exists. And because I would change a lot about the industry. And much of it is about the beauty standards. Because, you got to be movie star pretty to be an opera singer, or to be any kind of singer or performer at the highest level, with one exception, and that's Lizzo, right? But even her popularity has started to decrease a little bit. She's also working a lot on her health and fitness, mm-hmm. right? And I think that's awesome. I don't think that you actually have to be movie star pretty or have a six-pack or anything like that to be on stage. The industry disagrees with me right now, but I am much more concerned with getting someone to a level physically where their body, their instrument, no longer holds back their art form or their expression. Because there's a very popular opera called La Boheme. The musical Rent is based on this opera, where the main character, whose name is Mimi, same character in the musical and the opera. In the opera, she has tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, you cough yourself to death. It used to be called consumption. And, people who are in the end stages of tuberculosis can hide behind a pinky. Like, the body consumes itself. They end up being tiny, tiny, tiny. Is an audience really going to believe a 300-pound person singing this role? I mean, that's not a decision that I get to make. I think the answer is pretty obvious. But these days, a casting director is going to ask themselves that question, because a casting director wants to sell tickets, because it is an opera company. They got to sell tickets. They got to get butts and seats. And to do that, they want to produce the most believable piece of art. And someone who's morbidly obese, singing a role where the character is dying of consumption, it breaks the illusion, right? It takes an audience member out of the moment. Is that right? Is that fair? No, but it is true. So I don't want anyone to feel like they couldn't audition for that role. They couldn't audition for that Mimi role because they're too fat. And instead of saying, I want to change the whole world and change everyone's preconceived ideas and notions of how this character is supposed to look, because this character has tuberculosis and you can be super fat and have tuberculosis, that's fine. Well, no, you can't. Instead, I want to go to the singer and say, here's the tools that you might need to get yourself in shape to sing that role and be believable. I hope that's clear, because I'm trying to go at this from a different angle from where most people think about it, because the way that most people think about it sucks and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it seems like your approach is to impact each individual to the depth that you can, so that they can be the best that they can be, and empower them to have a longer, sustainable career that they love, right? But not trying to come in and fight City Hall and try to take down the whole industry based on their beauty standards as they sit today.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I appreciate that.
So, I mean, with that, right, you were in this industry, right? And it was maybe perhaps the reason that you're alive today, right? That conversation that wasn't too fun, right? How do you think, though, that the amount of time that you spent in that as a vocalist, right, with your voice, how do you think that that's informed your coaching journey and communication back to this industry?
So I think that's you've done your research. That's a great question for sure. Now, the way that it's impacted my coaching, I haven't had a whole lot of, personal trainers. I've had a few for sure that I worked very closely with. I'm still great friends with them for sure. But what I have had is a lot of voice teachers. And the way that voice teaching works is it's similar to one-on-one training in many ways. You have your assigned time and you go in and you're one-on-one with this person, and they're working in depth and doing very technical things and making sure that you're giving the best result. So just the way that relationships are formed, I think, is really crucial and really important. Because if you feel comfortable, if you feel like you're in a safe place, you're going to be able to, in a singing world, you're going to be able to express the character in a more profound way. In a lifting world, if you feel truly subconsciously safe, like this person has my back and my best interest at heart, you're going to be able to push a little harder, and you're going to be able to reach different levels that you otherwise couldn't. So how did it inform? I think it's all in relationship building. It has to be.
I think that's a beautiful response. And Mr. Ted, you are extremely calculated in your answers. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness in what you're saying. Right. And we were just talking about a handful of minutes ago about the kind of the relationship, the dichotomy between ambition, right, and contentment. And so I'm very curious, how do you instill the values of self-love and the balance between the ambition and contentment for your clients?
It's a constant battle, for sure. Most people that I work with on the fitness side, or because I work with everybody on both sides, right? But when it comes to the fitness piece, most people get down on themselves. They're like, I'm not blank enough, right? I'm not fit enough. I'm not losing weight fast enough. I'm not getting stronger as quick as I want to. My squat form still sucks. And on that side, you gotta give love, and you gotta point out, like, do you want to progress faster? Of course. Do you wish you lost 15 pounds this month instead of 12? Yes, of course. But let's say in July, you lost 12 pounds. We started working together July 1. I'm making up random numbers for sake of example. How much weight did you lose from June 1 to June 30? Oh, 0 pounds? Interesting. How much weight did you lose from July 1 to July 30? Oh, 12 pounds? Interesting. Is that better? Yes, obviously. Cool. Now, you can take that information and either say, I could have lost 13. You know, if I didn't have, if I had the Diet Coke at dinner last night instead of the full calorie Coke, I could have lost 13. Okay. But instead you lost 12. You are that much closer to your ultimate goal. Now you can take that information that you learned from what you could do better next time and apply it. And maybe next month you will lose 13 pounds. But if you're beating yourself up constantly, that's a bad headspace. And that's how you get into these vicious cycles, because you beat yourself up and then you comfort with food, and then you've suddenly lost the progress that you made. And the cycle starts all over again. And that's why most people never achieve their fitness goals, which is a hard thing to say as a fitness coach, as someone who's been coaching for 15 years. But I think it's true. Most people never reach their fitness goals. And that's why the obesity epidemic in North America just keeps getting worse year after year after year.
Yeah, it's almost like more information that's out there, and the more people that are regurgitating the same information, the easier it is to just avoid it all, right?
Yeah.
Because King Keto says keto is the only way. Carnivore MD says it's meat and nothing else. This person says it's vegan or bust. You're saying it's holistic and maybe don't be a perfectionist, right? Everyone's saying different things. So it's got to be, at least on my end, I feel as though it's extremely easy for people to just discount everyone because they don't know who's telling the truth.
You end up with paralysis by analysis, when in reality, going from 0 to anything is going to be way better than staying at 0. I don't care what diet you choose. I don't care what exercise mode you choose. I do care that you do something. But as far as balancing ambition and contentment when it comes to singing, that's harder, because there's no quantifiable, it's not that there's no, but there's less quantifiable data when it comes to singing. And quantifiable data is the lifeblood of fitness. You lost this many pounds. Your bench press went from here to here. You lost this many inches. You were a size 20. You're now a size 19, or whatever. I'm making up numbers, of course. When it comes to voice and stuff like that, it doesn't exist so much. And that's really one of the things that I'm working on changing, is putting in quantifiable data from session 1 to session 10 to session 1,000 that you can track and that you can see increase. Because even if you're not a numbers person, which is totally cool, most singers are not numbers people. They got into it for the art, not for the math. But you still know that when the numbers go up, that's a good thing. And you're getting better and you're improving. And that's really become a cornerstone of the way that I train people, train singers, I should say, in voice, in singing, is putting in those numbers. And that's what makes them athletic. Because athletes, gosh, the highest level athletes, they track everything, don't they? Every single workout, they're tracking their 40-yard times and down and down and down, and they're tracking their squats go up, and they're tracking their macros, they're tracking their sleep, their recovery, everything. Singers are like, yeah, I'm an athlete. It's fine. It's really, come on, Pavarotti. Let's get to work. And that's one of the big shifts, is putting in the data that you can quantify and you can track. And that's where the happiness comes. So cool, I was here, I'm now here. Fuck yeah, I'm getting better. Let's rock and roll. Sorry, I don't know if that clap threw off the audio levels, but that's how you balance that ambition and contentment. It's much easier in fitness. In voice, it's harder.
Okay. And you mentioned something that I couldn't find anywhere online, so I'm glad that you said something. You said working with them on both sides.
Yeah.
Does your program have like voice specific and vocalist specific exercises and a track to get them better on that side as well?
Yes. So this is where
let's go into this.
This is where things get real interesting, bro.
Okay.
We might need another hour. So this is my whole model. Here it is out for the public. And I did a Facebook reel on this the other day and it got 0 attention. So that's fine. But the way that I like to think about it is that, so singers call themselves athletes all the time. And I think that singers and all musicians are athletes. If you look at an opera, it takes roughly 3 hours. So it's a long time. You're underneath hot lights, wearing heavy costumes with a scary dude with a stick staring at you from down below. There's lots of eyes on you. And singing is an athletic event. It uses your entire body. It is as coordinated as anything in the athletic world, because you got to coordinate your breath with the way that your diaphragm works and the different muscular contractions to allow that space to expand. Then you got to reverse that and make sure that you're doing everything proper through your neck, through your face. And the whole time you also got to tell a story and make 100, 200, 1,000 people believe the story that you're telling while singing potentially some of the hardest music in the world. All of this with no amplification, by the way. So opera singers don't use microphones, usually. So it's super athletic. But opera singers only say they're athletes rather than behaving like athletes. The way that I like to think about it is like a house. So when you're building a house, there's 3 main sections. And if there's any contractors listening, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, but don't ruin my metaphor. So there's 3 main sections to the house that you're building. Level 1 is the foundation, right? This is the stuff that's underground. Nobody really pays that much attention to it, but it's done first. It's arguably the most important piece, because if you have a little crack in your foundation, your whole house is going to fall down. But it's the stuff that nobody pays attention to. The middle section is the walls, right? The walls is where all of the attention, all of the focus gets paid. So it's the thing you see the most. People spend the most time working on it, both the inside and the outside, to make it look attractive. The walls get painted, the walls get redone, all of that stuff. That's where people spend the most time and the most attention. But in construction, it's arguably the simplest piece. Throw up some 2x4s, drywall, done. The roof is every bit as important as the foundation. But again, once it's done, it takes a little longer, for sure. You got to be more precise with where you put your shingles and all that. But once it's done, unless there's a major problem, nobody really pays attention to it. But if there is a problem, you fix it as quickly as you can, because nobody likes getting rained on at breakfast, right? Now, translating that into athletics, the roof is the sport-specific skills. So when we're talking about singing, that is your vocal technique. That's your breath. That's also the mental skills. So that's resiliency. That's being able to deal with rejection. That's the mental strength. And I said mental strength instead of mental health on purpose, because I think there's a difference between those things. That's the sport-specific stuff. If you go down a level, we're talking about walls. That's the general fitness. That's being at a healthy place with your body. That's having strength and endurance to last through a difficult opera or symphony, whatever you're playing, to keep the muscular endurance at a certain level. But below that, the foundation. This is the stuff that I will nerd out about for decades. This is the subconscious stuff where we're dealing with actual brains, not mind, but brain, to make sure that all of that structure in your nervous system is built properly and there's no cracks, there's no hidden gaps in your nervous system that are impacting you higher up in your general fitness or in your sport-specific skills. Because again, if there's a crack in your foundation, you're done for higher up. You got to fix that crack. Now, when I talk about foundation and brains, I'm talking about things like your vestibular system, so your inner ear, your balance system. I'm talking about your visual system, your eyes. How much data do you get from what you see day to day? And does that impact you? Of course, yes, absolutely. The short answer is yes, it does, absolutely. I'm talking about the information that you absorb from your environment in any way, shape, or form, and how that impacts the walls and the roof. Because if you're not getting the best data from your environment, there's no way that you can make the best decision, even subconsciously, about what muscles to activate to give you the best outcome when it comes to performance. Doesn't matter if your performance is trying to sing a 3-hour opera, trying to do a 1-rep max clean and jerk, or trying to do a marathon, right? The whole time you're absorbing information from your environment, interpreting that information, and then giving an outcome to try and get to the highest level. The industry as it exists, both in singing, in the music industry and the athletics, only gives a shit about outcomes. And so they only train outcomes, right? They'll often train the outcome through the roof and the walls, right? Sport-specific skills, cool, we got to work on your sprinting technique. We got to work on your breathing technique. Walls, cool, we got to squat more. We got to, get stronger, spend more time on the treadmill, whatever. But nobody's talking about the foundation, that initial step of getting your subconscious to chill out so that you can actually take the limiters off and perform at the highest level no matter what. And that's the stuff that I'm really passionate about. I think that's the differentiator between what's going on and what needs to go on.
And on that foundation, if you had to say, hey, a progression of, obviously there's a ton of importance of everything that makes up that foundation. Mm-hmm. But where do you think that people in your target market, in your demographic, in your ICA, where do you think that they're lacking most in the foundation?
It's often body awareness and grounding, which is kind of a combo of foundation and walls, mm-hmm. right? But it's being able to be present and aware enough of your own body that it can go on autopilot. Like, you have to be so in the moment physically that you don't have to think about it, and you can just let the story and let the technique happen on its own. If you're a sprinter and you're thinking about your knee angle with every single step, you're screwed. Like, Usain Bolt is not thinking about that. He's thinking, let's go. Right? If you're a singer and you're thinking about, like, am I grounded right now? Am I in my body? Did I get a good enough breath? You're screwed. That has to be on autopilot. And unless your foundation is good enough to allow that to happen, it's never going to happen. You're going to get to a certain level and then cap out through no fault of your own. Just no one has ever trained that piece with you. So we got to go to that next level.
And at High Note specifically, how do y'all do that?
Through specific exercises that target the visual, the vestibular, the proprioceptive systems, making sure that they're getting done. And really, this is another key that we use. It's the assess, drill, reassess model, the ADR model. And it's very, very simple. You do a thing, might be singing a phrase, might be lifting a weight, might be taking a couple of steps, whatever. You do a drill that addresses one of the potential gaps in that foundation. If it's like an eye drill or like a vestibular system drill or whatever, then you immediately go and reassess. And you do the same thing again. From that, there's only 3 options. You either got better, you stayed the same, or you got worse. And I don't care which of those you turned out with, but we're going to learn something about your foundation immediately. If you got better, sweet. We just found a high payoff drill. You got to do that until your brain is like, okay, cool. I'm comfortable doing that. And until then, you're going to reap all of those benefits. High payoff drills lower your threat bucket so you can unleash your potential a little bit more. You stayed the same. Also great. Chances are we don't need to do that drill very much because your brain's already like, cool, I know how to do that. My vestibular system, the fluid in my inner ear is mobile in that direction. Awesome. Love it. You got worse. This is honestly my favorite when people get worse because the difference can be crazy. And it's from just like a quick head shift. Literally, you just move the fluid and they get way worse. And they're like, oh my God, what did you do to me? It's like, don't worry, we can fix it by moving your head the other direction. It's fine. But it shows just how impactful these subconscious, these systems that exist below our awareness are in our day-to-day lives. So you got worse. Great. Now we know that we have to spend some time doing that, because what happens if, like, you heard me say like head tilts, right? Or head shifts. If you're on stage and something happens up there and you have to look up there real quickly, if we find out that changing your head in that direction up and left is a low payoff drill and breaks you a little bit, if you have to do that on stage and then do something hard like sing, you're sunk, right? Just because you had to do this first. So we got to work on that. And we got to make sure that you can perform at the highest level, no matter what the world throws at you. Do great in not great situations. That's what a strong foundation lets you do.
Okay. I didn't know that opera singing was so involved, Mr. Ted. I had no idea. I mean, it is beautiful when it's done right. It's also ear piercing, right? When it's done in a way that is maybe not conducive to people wanting to stay around.
Potentially, yeah.
But did not know that there was all of these things going on. I mean, obviously in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, it's got to be more complicated than just singing for sure. And then breathing for sure. But did not know that it was that deep, right? Goodness. That's solid though. I'm glad to hear that your program has more than just fitness, nutrition, and accountability. Because I think a lot of people have a non-differentiated service right nowadays, especially online.
Yeah,
like
I hear you.
Doing all 3, like yeehaw, so is everyone else, right? What's different here? So I think that's very solid to hear. And in all of that, all of those drills, the protocols, the stimuli that you're putting people through, was all of that learned when you were in that world, or are you continuing to do continuing ed to better yourself in that way?
None of that was learned while I was in that world. Not a single bit of it. All of that was learned after another traumatic event that happened that we didn't talk about, where I was rejected from a program that I thought I was going to get into. And I know I'm just looking at time here. I can go for decades, but it's fine.
Good. Synopsis. You got it. What?
Okay. So synopsis, yeah. I was finishing my grad school at ASU, which is also how I got out to Arizona. And I didn't know what to do next. So I decided to go and audition for the doctorate program, the DMA, because I thought it would be really cool to be Dr. Ted. I no longer want to be Dr. Ted, by the way. But I was going and doing that audition, and I thought it was going to be a breeze, total shoe-in. I was singing rep that I knew for a room full of judges who I knew very well. I had sung for all of them before and gotten positive feedback, and most of them I'd like been out to dinner with. I was like, it's fine, I'm going to get in, no problem. I didn't. Long story short, and the institution that I was graduating from, that was giving me, a high five with one hand, also told me that I was being rejected and I wasn't good enough to go on. So I was getting a high five with one hand and a slap in the face with the other. And that shattered me, more than, in retrospect, more than it probably should have, because rejection is part of the business and it happens, but maybe I just wasn't mentally strong enough in that moment. So I had to figure out something else to do. It was the definition of all my eggs in one basket. And then the bottom fell out of that basket and I lost all my eggs. And I was training at a big luxury gym at the time, and I had a full client load, so that was fine. Like I was able to go full time there, and it was great. But I discovered this thing called athletic neurology, which is everything that we just talked about, right? Is athletic neurology. And this was in 2017 was the first class that I took there. Since then, I've gotten way more I've spent way more time and effort on that education than I ever had to in my vocal education, because all they do is work with traditional athletes, right? They work with the people who are trying to put an extra 5 yards on their golf game at the highest levels. I mean, like they work with, so this was a couple of years ago, but remember in the Soccer World Cup that year where in the finals it was Germany and Brazil, and Germany beat Brazil by like 7-1. It was a blowout in the World Cup final. Germany had employed a bunch of trainers, a bunch of coaches that went through the certification that I have also gone through, right? So, I mean, that's correlation, not causation, but it's a nice feather in the cap. But taking those tools through building the athletic foundation at the highest level for traditional athletes and applying them to a different breed of athlete that needs to perform at the highest level through incredible coordination and endurance. It took some work for sure to make the transition happen, but it was a pretty one-to-one comparison for the most part. And that's why I'm even more sure that singers are athletes, because the same tools that worked for elite soccer, baseball, football, hockey players also work with singers. So they're athletes, but we just got to start acting like it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're on an evangelical mission to have singers, opera singers, and everyone else in the music space understand that they are athletes, but not athletes by name, athletes by execution. And whether that be with you or someone else, they need to understand that it's more than just what kind of range do you have and how much endurance do you have with your lungs, right? To sing today on this stage right now, right? It's about way more than that.
Yeah,
and you're leading the charge to do that.
People love to claim that they're athletes without knowing what it means.
Well, I think that anyone that listens to this, that's hopped on a call with you or Miriam or anyone else on your team at any point, will have a better understanding of what athletic performance looks like, especially for anyone that is singing. Last question before we wrap up and you tell the people where they can find you.
Sure.
The internet has a lot of things, right? Your social media has a lot of things, your Facebook group, your LinkedIn, etc. There's tons of places to find information on Ted. But what is the one thing that you cannot find on social media or on the internet that you would want anyone that would come to be coaching with you to know about you and what you're truly about?
I wish you'd prepped me for this question, James.
Absolutely not.
So I hope that anyone who's gotten this deep in listening has kind of figured that out. But distilling it into a sentence or two, what's the one thing that you can't find about me online? I try to put the important stuff online so people can find it, right? But I think the biggest piece is that you gotta be able to listen to your body, but also know when your body is lying to you. Know when to push and know when to chill. But know that your body is probably going to tell you to chill more than you need to.
And there is the title to an all-new podcast, Round 2 with Ted and James. I really appreciate you spending the time here, man. It was a heck of a time, not just practicing sales, not just hopping on support calls. It is a pleasure to spend some time with you here, and I really appreciate you making the time for it. Where can the people find you? What is coming out soon with High Note? Where can they find the team? Where can they learn more about working with you if they feel like they fit in the space that you can help best?
Absolutely. So the best way to find me is we have our Facebook group, of course. It's called the Triple Threat Athlete Crew. It is a private group, so you do have to apply to that because I'm pretty selective with the people who I let in there. You can find us on Instagram at highnote_performance. Facebook is Ted Zimnicki. There's also Instagram. High Note Ted is my personal one. I was been putting so much into the business one. My personal Instagram has like 94 followers right now. So I would love to bump that to triple digits. That would just make me happy. And those are really the main places. Of course, you can also email me, ted@highnoteperformance.fit. And I'm out here. Let's change some lives. Let's change some industries.
Heck yeah. Well, I love to hear it. Don't go anywhere. We're going to stop the recording here. But thank you, everyone that's made it to the end of this, right there at an hour, and anyone that made it to Ted's answer about what you need to know about him. There is much more insight that will be coming if you start following him on Instagram. He just became, like he said, far more public on his own personal Instagram, and I think that that's just the start of where you're going, Ted. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank y'all for listening, and hang out for just 2 seconds, Ted.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.